I am Teresa, 34 years old, and until recently I thought I had a good balance between my career as an accountant and my family life. I always made time for Sunday dinners at my parents' home, even after my sister Amy, her husband Jack, and their 3 kids moved in temporarily. But when my entire family expected me to sacrifice my career and personal life to provide free childcare, everything changed. What was meant to be a temporary arrangement revealed painful truths about how my family truly valued me. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit subscribe and leave a comment below if you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted. My life before all this drama was pretty well structured. I worked as an accountant for a reputable firm in the city, having built my career steadily over the past decade. I prided myself on maintaining a healthy work-life balance, making time for friends, dating occasionally, and visiting my parents at least twice a month for dinner or special occasions. My parents, Maria and Robert, still lived in the suburban home where I grew up. Dad had worked as a high school teacher for 30 years before retiring 2 years ago, while Mom had been a nurse who scaled back to part-time as they entered their 60s. They had always been supportive, though Mom tended to be more protective of Amy, my younger sister. Amy and I had a decent relationship growing up, though being 3 years apart meant we weren't exceptionally close. She always had a more free-spirited approach to life, less focused on planning ahead. This sometimes created tension, as our parents seemed to have different expectations for us. I was expected to be the responsible one, while Amy got away with more impulsive decisions. 5 years ago, Amy married Jack after dating for just 6 months. He worked in construction while Amy had been jumping between retail jobs. They quickly had twins, a boy and girl named Liam and Lily, and then another son, Noah, just 2 years later. Their family of 5 lived in a small apartment across town, and while I didn't see them often, I made an effort to be present for birthdays and holidays. Everything changed last fall when both Amy and Jack faced job setbacks within weeks of each other. Jack's construction company downsized, and the retail store where Amy worked part-time closed permanently. With 3 children under 5 and suddenly no income, they were in legitimate financial trouble. My parents called me one Sunday afternoon to share the news that they had invited Amy and her family to stay with them temporarily. Mom explained, they just need a place to stay for a few months while they get back on their feet, save some money, and find new jobs. I remember having mixed feelings about the arrangement, but voiced my support. That makes sense. It must be really stressful for them, with the kids and everything. It's good they have somewhere to go. We knew you'd understand, Dad said with obvious relief. It's tight with the space, but family has to help family in tough times. I offered to help them prepare the house for 3 additional adults and 3 small children. The weekend before Amy's family moved in, I helped my parents rearrange furniture, clear out the guest room, and set up the twins in my old bedroom with portable beds. Noah would sleep in a crib in Amy and Jack's room. The house felt cramped already, but I kept my concerns to myself. The first few weeks seemed to go relatively smoothly. Amy found part-time work at a grocery store, though the hours were inconsistent. Jack picked up occasional construction jobs, but nothing permanent. I visited for our usual Sunday dinners, which had become significantly more chaotic, with 3 young children running around. I noticed the changes in my parents almost immediately. Mom, who had always been energetic despite being in her 60s, looked tired. Dad, who valued his quiet time reading or watching history documentaries, now had to retreat to the garage for any semblance of peace. The house was filled with toys, the refrigerator covered with children's drawings, and the general noise level had increased tenfold. How are you holding up? I asked Mom privately one Sunday while helping her with dishes. Oh, it's an adjustment, she admitted with a tired smile. But the grandkids bring so much life to the house, and Amy and Jack really need our help right now. I noticed she didn't directly answer my question about how she was doing, but I didn't push it. The first time I was asked to babysit happened casually about a month into the arrangement. I had stopped by on a Wednesday evening to drop off some tax documents for my dad, when Amy mentioned she had a job interview the following morning. Mom has her shift at the hospital, and Jack has a promising lead on a construction job, Amy explained. Would you mind watching the kids for just 2 hours tomorrow morning? You work from home on Thursdays anyway, right? Though I had an important virtual meeting scheduled, I rearranged my calendar to help out. Sure, just this once. What time should I come over? What was supposed to be 2 hours turned into 4 as both Amy and Jack returned later than promised, with vague explanations about traffic and the interviews going really well. I ended up taking my lunch break while still watching the children eating a peanut butter sandwich with one hand while holding Noah with the other. I didn't complain that time, or the next time, or the time after that. But I did start to notice a pattern forming, and my concerns grew as the requests became more frequent and less apologetic. What had started as emergency assistance was becoming an expectation, and I was beginning to feel taken advantage of. Still, I hesitated to speak up. My parents seemed determined to support Amy and Jack no matter what, and I didn't want to be seen as unsupportive during their difficult time. But as 1 month turned into 2, and then 3 with no sign of Amy and Jack making concrete plans to move out, I found myself increasingly torn between maintaining family harmony and protecting my own boundaries. 3 months passed, and what was supposed to be a temporary situation showed no signs of ending. Amy had settled into her part-time job at the grocery store, while Jack picked up inconsistent construction work that he complained didn't pay enough. Meanwhile, my Sunday visits had become an unspoken obligation rather than a choice. These family dinners had evolved into something I both looked forward to and dreaded. I loved seeing my parents and spending time with my niece and nephews, but there was a new undercurrent of expectation that made me uncomfortable. Amy and Jack had begun to assume I would watch the children after dinner, giving them time to relax or run errands. The first few times I didn't mind. Liam and Lily were actually quite fun once I got to know their personalities better. Liam loved building elaborate structures with blocks, while Lily had an impressive imagination and would create detailed stories about her stuffed animals. Noah, being just 2, mostly wanted to be held or to toddle after his older siblings. Teresa, would you mind keeping an eye on the kids while we run to the store? Amy would ask casually after dinner, already reaching for her purse and car keys. We won't be long, Jack would add. You're so good with them. They really love their Aunt Teresa. I'd smile and agree, genuinely enjoying the children's company. But these quick trips would often stretch to 2 or 3 hours. I'd find myself bathing the children, reading bedtime stories, and sometimes even putting them to bed before Amy and Jack returned, often with just a small bag from the store, despite their extended absence. On one particular Sunday, Amy confided in me while I helped her fold laundry. We've been looking at apartments, but everything is so expensive now. The landlords want first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. We just don't have that kind of money saved yet. I nodded sympathetically, but a small voice inside me wondered why, after 3 months of living rent-free with my parents, they hadn't managed to save anything. I pushed the thought away, feeling guilty for my skepticism. As weeks passed, I noticed my parents looking increasingly worn down. Mom had dark circles under her eyes, and Dad seemed more withdrawn. The house, once immaculately kept, now constantly looked as though a tornado had swept through it, despite Mom's best efforts. During one visit, I discovered that my childhood bedroom, which had initially been set up for the twins, had been completely transformed. My old desk, where I'd studied throughout high school, had been removed to make space for a play area. The bookshelves that once held my collection of novels and accounting textbooks now stored toys and children's clothes. Even the walls had been decorated with cartoon character decals. I hope you don't mind, Mom said when she noticed me staring at the transformed space. We needed more room for the kids' things, and since you haven't used this room in years… Her voice trailed off and I forced a smile. Of course I don't mind. But I did. Not because I needed the space, but because no one had bothered to ask me or even mention it. It was as if my history in the house was being erased to accommodate Amy's family. I began scaling back my visits, coming every other Sunday instead of weekly. This led to a barrage of texts from Amy. Mom and Dad were disappointed you weren't here yesterday. The kids kept asking where their Aunt Teresa was. We all miss you when you're not around. These messages were always followed by requests. By the way, would you be able to watch the kids Thursday evening? Jack and I have a meeting with a potential landlord. I started to feel guilty for protecting my time, but tried to maintain some boundaries by being less available. This strategy backfired when Amy began calling with emergencies that required immediate assistance. Liam has a fever and I have to work. Mom's at the hospital and Dad has a doctor's appointment. Can you please come over? Jack can't miss this job opportunity. Noah is having a really bad day and I'm exhausted. Could you take him for just a few hours so I can get some sleep? The twins' preschool is closed today for a teacher development day. We both have to work. There's literally no one else who can help. My work performance began to suffer as I took personal days and worked late into the night to compensate for the time spent helping with the children. My boss had noticed commenting during my quarterly review that I seemed distracted and less focused than usual. The situation reached a painful point when I canceled weekend plans with friends to help with the children when they all caught a stomach bug. I spent 2 days cleaning up vomit, doing countless loads of laundry, and making bland food for queasy stomachs. Amy and Jack appeared only sporadically, claiming they were too squeamish to handle the mess. When the crisis passed, they offered only a casual "thanks for the help" before disappearing to get some fresh air for several hours. As I drove home Sunday night exhausted, and knowing I faced a full week of work with no real weekend rest, I began to question how much longer this situation could continue. The line between helping family during a crisis and being exploited was becoming increasingly blurred, and I was starting to feel resentment building in my heart. 6 months after Amy and Jack moved in with my parents, there were still no concrete plans for them to move out. Their temporary situation had morphed into a seemingly permanent arrangement that everyone except me appeared to have accepted. The dynamics in our family had shifted dramatically, with my role apparently reduced to that of an on-call babysitter and support person. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I'd had a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet night at home when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice cheerful, but with that undertone of expectation I'd grown to recognize. "Teresa, honey, Amy, and Jack have some exciting news. We're having a family dinner tomorrow to celebrate. Can you come?" "What's the news?" I asked, already rearranging my mental calendar. "Oh, they should tell you themselves. Just come for dinner around 6, okay?" When I arrived the following evening, the house was unusually tidy, and Mom had prepared a special meal. Amy was practically glowing